Hi there, and welcome to Naturally Recovering Autism. I am your host, Karen Thomas, and I want to thank you so much for being here and being a proactive parent and getting the resources that you need to let your child live their most fulfilling and independent life possible. When my own son was diagnosed with autism, I was told to drug him and try behavioral therapies, and there was nothing else that we could do for him but manage his symptoms the rest of his life. But I didn't want to do that. Fortunately, my background in craniosacral therapy of now 30 years let me know that the brain can and does heal, but I didn't know that much about autism. What I did know is that I didn't want to just mask the symptoms with dangerous drugs. I wanted to find the causes and work with them naturally. And fast forward, it took me a decade and a lot of time and effort, but today my son is no longer diagnosable with autism after being told it could not happen. So I'm here to share with you valuable resources to save you the time and some of the expense that I had to spend to figure it out, and to help you let your child lead to their best results possible. Every child's level of recovery is different, but we know that children who couldn't sleep through the night are sleeping now through the night and happily. Their immune systems are now strong where they were once sick all the time. Children who were nonverbal and their parents were told they could never speak are now speaking. Children who were getting D's and F's in school are getting A's and B's. And those that were so anxious all the time and couldn't sit still and were uncomfortable in their own bodies are now calm and happy and relaxed. And they're leading fulfilling and independent lives with friends. This is what we want for our kids. So I'm here to share the resources with you so that you can get the best results for your child, the best possible. And you can start that right now with my free download of the top 7 foods to eliminate beginning today, of the top foods that are the most inflammatory and toxic that are contributing to those physical and behavioral symptoms of autism that your child is having. They're making his life uncomfortable. So you can get that right now at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/7 foods. And feel free to share that with anybody you know who would be interested. And I will also link to it in today's show notes. There's, of course, a lot more than diet, but this is something you could start doing today that will begin to reduce those symptoms. And I'm happy to share everything I can with you. So right now, let's dive into today's episode. Hi there, and thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. Truly, truly appreciate you being such a great parent and getting the resources that you need for your child. And today's topic, I hope, will not disappoint. It is something that is so important in children of autism for their recovery process and their health. And it's so commonly missed. And even tests can come up negative for it. And today we're going to be talking about parasites, parasitic infections, and how it contributes to the symptoms of autism. It's really crazy how many different parasites and pathogens that can actually be in the gut. And there are hundreds of parasites. And they have become a worldwide problem. This isn't just third world countries or various ones that we used to think of. It is now all over the world, the Western world, due to travel and everything else becoming so easy over the years, that things have spread. We know that now, as of course with COVID, we saw how easy things could spread there. Well, it's kind of the same with parasites. So it's spread all over the world into the Western countries as well. And it's estimated that about 80% or more of the American population have parasites, but most don't even know about it. So many children on the autism spectrum also have parasitic problems, and most parasites live with us harmoniously until the gut flora weakens to the point that they become a problem. Now, we know kids with autism generally have a weak gut. I mean, that just happens to be one of the common issues that go along with the symptoms of autism. And hopefully you've been listening to me for a while and know that the gut controls the brain, and it makes up 80% of the immune system and its strength. So if your gut's not working well, your brain can't function well, and neither can your immune system. So how do we get parasites? Common ways that we get them are from inhaling them. Actually, they can just be in the air that we're breathing. They're very often in the food we eat, especially if something's raw. Salad is very commonly a culprit, not washed properly. Drinking water is a really high source. Swimming in contaminated water, especially lakes, because the water doesn't move much like it does more so in rivers and in oceans. And then also we can get it in through our skin. Any lesions on the skin, especially on the feet, you can be walking on the beach in the sand. Things can get into your feet very easily without shoes on. And it's a very easy entrance point for the body as well. Animals also carry parasites and they can pass them on to humans. And then, of course, poor hygiene also plays a role. Well, cats are notoriously known that the parasites that live on cats actually prefer humans. So it is important to, if you're petting your kitty or you got them around, do you want to wash your hands after you've pet them, especially before you go get something from the kitchen to eat? You don't want to be using those hands that have been petting animals or in various places without washing your hands first. That is a good preventative measure. Also, what kind of problems do parasites cause? They can come up with, there are so many things, and the bugs themselves aren't always necessarily the problem, but the existing co-infections in the body that they create. Parasites bring with them bacteria, viruses, and fungi, different types of fungus. Viruses in the nervous system often come from Staphylococcus and lungworm. So I'm going to go through symptoms here in a few minutes, but it's pretty common. Of course, you hear the term lungworm. Well, you can know that it gets into the lungs. It's respiratory issues. And a lot of these viruses, and a lot of kids carry staph infections as well. And that's very well known. Mold biotoxins, as we've talked about in the past, they can create something called MARCoNS, which is an antibiotic-resistant staphylococcal infection in the nasal passageways. So it's very important, of course, to make sure that your home is mold-free. And I'll link to some things about mold on the show notes page for today too, which, by the way, will be at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/126. And when parasites are present in the immune system, it's even weaker. And the child is then more susceptible, or the person, the adult, is more susceptible to bacterial and viral infections. And now leaky gut syndrome, which we've talked about in the past, and I will link to more information for you on the show notes, it allows the parasites to enter the bloodstream and make their way to the organs, including the brain. It's very important to know that parasites get into the brain and they can cause a lot of symptoms. And again, I'll go through those here in just a minute. I just wanted to cover some of these basics first, so you had a greater understanding of where they might come from and some of the things that they're capable of doing. Parasites will often live inside the mucosa of the intestinal lining. So they can live in the gut, but they're also capable of living outside of the intestines too. So again, you've got leaky gut, which means you've got holes in the gut, and those parasites and anything else where maybe if your immune system was strong and you didn't have leaky gut, you'd be able to pass those parasites out of your body without them inhibiting you, without them staying, without them getting into your bloodstream and then moving around your system and getting into the rest of your body. But especially if your immune system is weak and if your gut is weak, then you're much more susceptible to these, especially if it's on anything that you eat from foods. When my son was young, I remember he was about four years old, and we were at a lake that we go to up in the Sierras every year. We love it up there. It's beautiful. And he was, picking up rocks and, kind of throwing them into the water and just for fun. And later, I remember he ate something. Well, about a few weeks later, we noticed he was really having some dysentery type issues. And it turned out he had Giardia. Now, again, I'm going to talk here about how testing often doesn't pick things up. Even a doctor friend of mine at that time said, "How did it even come up in the test?" And I said, "Yeah, it must be a pretty strong infection." But they're not always detectable in tests. Well, anyway, it turned out from touching those rocks that had Giardia water on them and then eating food with his hands, a sandwich or whatever it was later on, he was getting the Giardia from his hands onto his food and then into his mouth. So again, really be careful to wash your hands before eating. Parasites also dysregulate the immune system. So you never want to boost the immune system in someone with autism because they already have immune overactivity. It's autism is kind of linked to as being an autoimmune type of illness and health issues. So it's very important to know we don't want to boost the immune system. but what we do is strive to regulate or modulate the immune system. And then because parasites really dysregulate the immune system, they really throw it out of whack. Once you've done a parasite protocol and cleaned things up, you want to make sure that you balance out the immune system afterwards. So I just wanted to make sure you noted that. And if you're working with anybody, make sure that they are conscious of that as well. So many people, practitioners even tend to really try to boost the immune system because it's so weak in a child with autism, but you've got so many dysregulated issues going on that you don't want to be boosting it anymore for autoimmune issues and then have the immune system attack itself and attack its own tissues in the body. And that's what kinds of things can happen. So again, we're looking at regulating and modulating the immune system always in children with autism. So what are some of the symptoms you get to look for? And remember, mom, dad, grandma, everybody around, siblings, everybody, you should look for these because we pass parasites around in the family, especially with the people we live with. So keeping that in mind, I have a friend, her little girl, when they were, I think she was about 2 years old, she was at a sleepover at a friend's house, and the mom, who was a good friend of the other mom, had the girls take a bath together for fun. They're playing in the bathtub. Well, one of them happened to have some Giardia issues that leaked into the bath water from the child, and it got into the other child, her own child, and it ended up giving her child. That was another case of Giardia. So again, knowing how some of these things can be passed. If you're changing diapers, you want, or dealing with poop at all, because I know with children with autism, sometimes it's and even older children, we have to kind of clean up some things after them. And you got to make sure you're really doing your due diligence about cleaning everything in the home, the toilet, the bathroom, anything that got any fecal matter on it, especially. And if you've got anything on your hands, you really want to wash them very, very well after that as well. People can actually go decades without symptoms of parasites. And even though the parasites are feeding on them, and this is really, really common. And that's why people might have some of the symptoms I'm going to run through. There are quite a few to go through here, and they can cross over with other issues. As we've noted already, they can cause bacterial and viral and other type of infections. So you end up kind of with these multiple system infections and multiple types of infections caused possibly originally by the parasite itself, or the weakening of maybe a viral overload or something, or from leaky gut that has allowed the parasite to come in and thrive. Many of the same symptoms of those with parasites can even be similar to food allergies and leaky gut. And it's also very commonly seen in malnourished children and seen as what's called a failure to thrive. So the symptoms to look for are, now this is a number, I put number 1 on the show notes, you'll be able to read through them later again, but the symptoms to look for, the first one and the most common is one that isn't really thought of, and it's chronic constipation. Most people think when you've got a parasitic infection that you will have diarrhea, and you can have diarrhea. That's another common one. Diarrhea is common from the bug called Giardia. Now, there are, like I mentioned, like 200 different types of different parasites, and then there are worms, and these types of things will affect us differently in how they behave and what part of the brain is being affected by them as well. So that's why I'm going to run through not only physical, but emotional types of symptoms that can come from them. So chronic constipation, very, very common. Sometimes it can go constipation to diarrhea to constipation to diarrhea. Sometimes it's just chronic constipation, and other times it can be more on the end of diarrhea. So those are something to look for: chronic constipation, diarrhea, intestinal discomfort, of course, bloating, gas. Now, as we mentioned earlier, these will overlap with other symptoms, especially like candida and things, but bloating, gas, dark circles under the eyes, itchy skin or skin rashes, anger and crazy type behaviors, impulsivity, seizures, depression, and even suicidal thoughts and behaviors, brain fog and a lack of ability to learn, chronic fatigue, very, very common. PANS, which is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric syndrome, and I've done past episodes on that in the past, and I will link to some of those on the show notes page so you can look into it further. It's when the immune system's attacking the brain. And so what happens is these viruses and these parasites and things come in, and even mold, different things come in and they trigger PANS because they're triggering the immune system to overreact. You'll see, I'm just going to say real quickly, again, I'll link to it in the show notes so you can go and dive deeper later on. But PANS, you'll see sudden onset of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or anxiousness, or lack of sleep, or clinginess, or fearfulness. This is common in PANS. And again, PANS can be triggered by the parasite. Additional symptoms, sinus problems, respiratory issues, including asthma, nausea, mouthing. You ever see your child, a lot of parents in my program will say, Karen, my child's mouthing a lot. They're always putting their fingers in their mouth. They're trying to put everything in their mouth, even if it's not food. Mouthing is commonly a sign of a nutritional deficiency, and they're craving a way to get some type of nutrition, because what's happening is that the bugs are eating the nutrition from the food that they're eating, so they're not able to get the nutrition even if they are eating. So mouthing is very common, and nail biting is a very, very common sign of parasites. So nail biting, I might see drooling, a lot of drooling happens, and teeth grinding is very common. So bruxism, or teeth grinding, whether it's during the day or at night, teeth grinding is a very common symptom of parasites. Hair pulling, headaches, immune system dysregulation, which we mentioned already, iron deficiency, and personality types in women are overly trusting and cooperative, even when the person or situation would be seen as dangerous to others. Personality type in men are extreme risk takers. These guys that are flying off the top of mountains in squirrel suits, and, just extreme risk takers. So one of the things that you can do is palpate their gut. If you look for hard spots in the abdomen, and this will be mentioned in the show notes, so you can go back and look at it, but you'll massage the abdomen in a clockwise motion around the belly button. Now, this is really good to do anyway. It's helpful for digestion, because that's the way our digestion moves, is in a clockwise pattern around the belly button. But with parasites, you're looking for hard spots, and especially in the upper GI, if you know where the stomach is, and the upper part of this, where the stomach is, upper part of the abdomen, usually right around the center of it, it might be really hard right there, where normally it should be softer. And that is because parasites actually kind of like to hang out there in the stomach, because it's up high in the GI, in the gastrointestinal tract, and that's where the nutrition first really comes in, and the nutrition is still there, versus in the lower bowels, where a lot of the nutrition has been used by the body. The parasites don't really want to hang out down in the lower bowels, because they're just getting the leftovers and that the body hasn't used. They want to stay up in the stomach, or in the upper GI, where the nutrition is when it first comes in, and take basically the pick of the crop. So that's why we'll see a lot of failure to thrive, a lot of nutritional deficiencies, because the parasites will be taking the nutrition from your food. And you might notice too, your child is hungry a lot, even if they've eaten, because again, the body is craving the nutrition from the food it needs, but it's not getting it from the food, unfortunately. So that's why parasites need to be taken care of. Parasites like B vitamins a lot, and tyrosine, which also is triggered in PANS to overproduce tyrosine as well. Often our kids can be low in tyrosine, which is an amino acid that helps us think and helps us with our reward center. So sometimes we'll take some L-tyrosine to build up that dopamine, but that's kind of something you've really got to regulate and make sure that your child really needs it, because parasites also, your child might be deficient. You just want to make sure you're not just feeding the parasite if you add in more tyrosine, if that is an issue with parasites. So B vitamins, again, if you've got a big parasitic issue, you're not wanting to load up on B vitamins. But you'll also notice that a lot of the things that the parasites want, that you or the human or the host, your child, will be craving. This is very common. That's why people will crave sugar, especially if they have a candida overgrowth, which is very, very common, of course, in children with autism. You're going to crave the things that the bugs in you live on and thrive and want. So you want to try to avoid those. Again, I mentioned hungry all the time, again, because the parasites are eating all of the nutrition, and the mouthing by itself is that symptom of low nutrition, because again, the parasites are eating from the food we eat. So eradication, now this is a big process. Most medical type practitioners, I'll just say, will use antibiotics. Now, antibiotics are most commonly, for many of these bugs, they're antibiotic resistant. And they develop something called a biofilm around them, which I've done episodes on in the past, especially when we talk about candida. And biofilm is this strong protective matrix that these bugs are capable of building around themselves to protect themselves. And sometimes when we do these eradication programs, these protocols with things like antibiotics, it might even kill off initially the adult bug, but the adult parasite, but they lay eggs, and those eggs are going to hatch later on. So they're very cyclic. Conventional methods of eradicating parasites are very short-term, really, at best. And again, antibiotics, say just as an example, one called Flagyl, will kill off, again, the adults, possibly initially, and the eggs that have been laid will eventually hatch, and then the infestation returns. When you initially feel better and the tests all come up negative, it really misleads you to believe that you're clear. And treating the parasite alone will not treat the whole problem. And again, we're also, kind of domino affecting back to the viruses and the bacteria and the fungus that they leave behind as well. All of that needs to be taken care of. And we're all exposed to parasites on a regular basis. The question arises as to why some parasitic infections, why some contract them and why others do not. And the main reason why parasites are not eradicated is really due to a weakened intestinal tract, which I have mentioned already, an overly acidic diet, and a congested liver. Now, our kids all have congested livers. That is common in autism, and you've got to, and hopefully you've been listening to me and sticking with me for a while, you know that I'm all about, you've got to support the detoxification pathways, which mean the liver, and methylation pathways. All of these things have to be supported before you really start doing a big protocol of any type that is going to cause die-off symptoms. And again, die-off is when these bugs die, they will leave behind more bacteria, and they're dead bugs that your body has to get rid of. Now, what happens is if your liver's not working well and your detoxification pathways aren't working well, then these toxins back up in the blood and the lymphatic system, and they can become absorbed again by the body. And so this is where we can harbor, more infections and end up with heightened behavioral, physical and emotional symptoms in our kids. So we've got to support the liver. We've got to support detoxification pathway, binders, minerals, the things that we've talked about in the past episodes as well. Very important. And of course, a good diet. You've got to be working to heal that gut lining up. You cannot keep giving the inflammatory foods. And I will link in the show notes to my free download of the top 7 foods to avoid to help reduce the inflammation, because they're highly inflammatory foods that the inflammation keeps the gut lining weak, keeps those holes in the gut. You also don't want to be feeding any of the bad bacteria from these processed carbs or sugars and things in these foods. And a lot of them have a lot of toxins. The download is to my 7 foods guide. The direct link is naturallyrecoveringautism.com/7 foods. That's just the number 7 and foods with no spaces in between. Now, again, I'll link to it on today's show notes, but I don't just tell you what those 7 foods are. In that download, I give you a little explanation, because I think education is so important, or I know it is, because the more you are really understanding why you're doing something, even if it's complicated at first, because our children can be picky eaters and be literally addicted to these foods. And we're talking about some of the reasons why these bugs are craving these things and they're living in them. So it's a transitional process to move away from these foods into healthier foods. But the more you know about, again, why you're doing something, I think the more you understand the importance of sticking to it, even through those challenging times. And again, just remember, any type of changing of diet is a transitional process. So, be kind to yourself as well. I know parents put a lot of pressure on themselves, like, Karen, I can't do this. There's no way my child will change their diet. These are a lot of the foods they eat, and they likely are. They're the worst top 7 foods. So please, please go get that guide, and you can start implementing those changes today. Again, it's a process. It takes time, but you can start it today. In order for parasitic infection to be cleared, again, the liver must be cleansed and the intestinal tract healthy. So again, that diet is really important. Stay on top of these parasites. As I mentioned, they lay eggs and they are cyclic. They will rotate. The adults lay eggs. The eggs will hatch much later on. So you've got to make sure that you're on a continual, safe protocol. When the eggs hatch, you want to be sure they don't get a chance to grow and do more harm. You really want to keep well hydrated with pure water, no tap water that is not properly filtered. I've done episodes on water in the past, and you can find those, and I'll link to one in the show notes today. I'm also giving you a link to one of the best water filters I've found, and there's a discount code available for it as well, with the link to learn more about it, which again will be on today's show notes, which, as I mentioned before, are at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/126. So testing and treatment for parasites. Now, testing is optional. And I say that because a lot of money is spent on tests that are not accurate. Now, it is so common to take a parasite test and have it come up negative, even when the bugs are present. Within 15 minutes of, say it's a stool sample, that stool, though, they can actually become invisible, hide, and not be found. I mean, it's insane, really, the intelligence that these bugs are capable of. And so even when a stool sample especially comes up negative for parasites, they might actually exist, but the test didn't pick them up. So it's, again, your choice. So I've linked to one of the better ones to get for a test if you want to look at one, is Dr. Data's has a stool test that's a 3-day, because your body is excreting things at different times on different days. So at least it covers 3 days to try and get a better chance of result. And that's why they do it that way too. Parasites are also most active during a full moon. So try to test and treat them during full moons. Note that the tests, again, are not always accurate. If you choose a test and it comes up negative, it is still highly suggested to eradicate them. In my membership program, we use organic, proprietary, herbal formulas that are safe and do help to regulate the immune system, and work with, of course, the co-infections, mold, Lyme, and PANS, including parasites. And the parasite protocol should also include fighting Lyme, because it's important to be aware that Lyme lives inside of parasites. So you want to work with both together so you don't release one and have a big parasitic infection or a big Lyme infection going on in the body now, because you've opened things up for one, but not the other. So it's good to work with both of them at the same time. I also want to do a little side mention that seeing somebody like a biosystemic dentist and dental work, there are things called cavitations in our teeth where we may have had or in our gums where we may have had a past extraction or something going on with our teeth. Now, Lyme lives in the mouth, and you may even see rashes, and it also lives in the jawbone. So you might be seeing rashes around. Now, if you've got dental work done, you might want to make sure that you don't have any cavitations or pockets of bacteria there, that are open that could be causing more parasitic and Lyme type of infections. So it's good to see a dentist before you start a protocol 2 or around the time, just to make sure that the teeth aren't harboring and holding more problems. From the work that you're going to be doing, you want to make sure that you're getting at everything. Now, I mentioned the herbal formulas, and due to many logistics, multiple reasons, I'm not including the necessity of liver and diet support, but along with the knowledge to use them, I'm not able to offer them outside of my program, but I do want to make sure that you get help now. And so the best way to do it right now is what I mentioned with the diet. Now, you can begin reducing the inflammation and the toxins that contribute to leaky gut. Now, of course, this is step 1. There's much more to do, but it is something that you can begin with right now. And again, starting to work with that leaky gut to stop allowing those bugs to continue to get into the rest of the body. Some of your child's behaviors, see the symptoms, could be due to many of these issues. So there's a lot to look at here. You've got leaky gut plus the co-infections and the parasites. You want to support the detoxification pathways along with a diet. So again, please get my free downloadable guide to the top 7 foods to eliminate, and start at least right now working on this leaky gut syndrome. And another thing to make sure that you do is always utilize these resources and Eradication for anyone in your household, because we do spread infections around to one another. Even one of the ways that our children can even contract parasites is that maybe mom had parasites when she was pregnant, and that they were able to get into the baby even before it was born. So you want to make sure that everybody is getting taken care of, because it's about the whole family's health. And again, you can go back and look at these symptoms. And again, many of them overlap with a lot of other issues, but that's why it is so common, like chronic fatigue, inability to think clearly. All of these things are so much involved with parasites, but they're very, very infrequently thought of as one of the issues, or they're missed in tests. So please, again, get all of the resources that I mentioned today at naturallyrecoveringautism.com/126. That's where the show notes will be at. And again, I hope this was really helpful for you. Parasites are something that can be worked with very, very early on in an autism recovery program. And we also start doing it. Usually one of the first things that we begin working with, even in my program, because you don't want to have an underlying parasitic infection causing other problems that you're working on. So it's very, very important. So I hope my free 7 food guide helps you for now. And I'm here to give you further resources in the future, because I do want to help you. I appreciate you being here today and being a proactive parent, getting these resources and becoming educated further on how you can help your child, because again, there are a lot of things that others just really don't know about. And I'm here to help you learn more about new things, or educate you further on things that you may have already known about. But it is a way for you to help your child to improve. I mean, you can go back and look at that list of symptoms, and you might notice too that your child has some of these symptoms, and know now that it's something that you've got to get working on, and sooner better than later. And it can help them so much, and possibly you as well, because the irritability, the depression, the lack of sleep, the lack of the chronic fatigue, that's not comfortable for anybody to live with. And we're parents, we need to be really at our best that we can be for our kids. So we need to take care of ourselves too. It's about getting the whole family healthy again. So very important. And I hope it's been helpful for you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.